Achi from Arab American from Syria. Johnny, get a chance to hear that clip?
Hello, Dedon. Thanks for having me on the show. Dedon, I tried to listen. It wasn't too clear for me, so if you can give me just the highlights.
Well, basically, he said that, number one, he had a peace delegation from South Africa that went to Syria, that they were impressed by the unity of diversity that they saw there. And of course, they're talking about the ethnic, religious, gender, class unity.
Sure.
They said that the Palestinian question is the major reason they see why the assault's being made on Syria. Then he talked about how Bahrain, Qatar, and Saudi Arabia are blaring examples of lack of democracy, of lack of unity and diversity, yet the United States and Western Europe supports these dictatorships, these feudal, Wahhabist, backwards religions. So he, as a South African representing the African National Congress, saw that contrast and clearly came out in support of the present government in Syria, especially in terms of unity and diversity. That's a kind of quick overview of what he said.
It's amazing to hear that. It's so. I'm happy to see that the National African Congress, is talking against what he's supposed to be. It is a revolutionary movement, and it's talking up against what the West is trying to tell you, a revolution in Syria. So he's taking the side of the Syrian people, the side of the Syrian nationalists, the unity of Syria, against the so-called revolution, because it's not a revolution in Syria. And that is what we count on, to hear voices like this, who were supposed to be revolutionaries, talk against what's so-called revolution in Syria, because it is not the revolution in Syria. So that is really great to hear.
You know, it's interesting because one thing he drew the parallel with how U.S. imperialism and Western imperialism supported the racist apartheid government, minority government of South Africa against people fighting for democracy and freedom. So there's another example of that. But what we need to do is get an update on what's going on in Syria, because there's been some recent proclamation by the United States that Syria is not fulfilling its pledge to remove the chemical weapons and the stockpiles. If you can address that as well as any new developments you may come across.
Absolutely. We start with that piece. Of course, the U.S. is criticizing what they call the delay in the timetable for eliminating the chemical weapons. Now, it is correct, there is a delay, and more likely the February 5th deadline, which was set initially to get rid of the entire stockpile, but it literally says the February 5th deadline was initially assigned to the entire stockpile to be safely removed out of the country. And the key word here is safely removed. So to accuse the Syrian government to be deliberately stalling is absurd, because the Syrian government wants to have this stockpile removed, but they want it to be removed safely, and I'll come to that in a minute. Remember, we spoke on your show maybe a month ago when there was an article that the insurgencies have attacked two of these facilities where the chemical weapons were stocked. Correct. So what I want to say is that Mr. Obama, in his State of the Union a few days ago, and I quote him for saying that the American diplomacy backed by the threat of force is why Syria's chemical weapons are being eliminated. Well, Mr. Obama was lying through his teeth, because it wasn't through the threat of force. It was through the will of the American people. We know that over 4 million phone calls and similar number of emails were sent to tell the world, tell the administration that the American people are against this war. Not in addition to that, it was a false flag operation, that some evidence was starting to surface at that time that the US-backed terrorists are the ones who used the chemical attack and not the Syrian. Now, again, there is delay, obviously, but the concern of the Syrian government is the security and how to move these safely on the route. That's why the Syrian government, and the New York article fails to explain this, Syrian government has demanded additional equipment like armored jackets for shipping containers. So, and also equipment for detectors for roadside bombs. We know the highways in Syria are not safe. They can't be safe. You need to move Dedon to Latakia, which is on the Mediterranean Sea, and those stockpiles are in all 14 provinces. So to get to Latakia, you're going to have to go through many roads that are not safe. So unless the safety of the inspection team and the safety of these chemical weapons are taken into consideration, we cannot move them. They should not be moved.
It's interesting because clearly, given the history of the CIA covert operation and their initiating and provoking conflict, one of those containers carrying the gas, if not, like you said, sealed, with a lead container wrapped around it could easily be hit by a so-called guerrilla or so-called rebel, and the gas would be released, and there'd be a pretext for Western intervention.
Oh, truly, no doubt, absolutely. And the United States is still trying to find that loophole where it can intervene. And I do want to talk about the last decision by the United States government to further send weapons. It approved more funding for more weapons to what the United States called moderate rebels. We've been talking about this, Dedon, for a year and a half, you and me, at least from the very first time when they approved for the Syrian support group $400 million to be sent first for non-lethal weapons. Now we're talking about real weapons. While Geneva 2 was still happening, you are supposed to be a broker of peace. You bring all parties to come to Geneva to talk about, how can we end this suffering and end this ugly war. At the same time, you go secretly and vote for sending more weapons to so-called moderate rebels. There is no moderate rebels. We've said it a million times on your show. Every single piece of weapon is used to kill. Any weapon in a war is a lethal weapon, and you cannot end the war by sending more weapons. So there was a very important also hearing, a Senate hearing, Senate intelligence hearing, and James Clapper, the U.S. Director of National Intelligence, told in the hearing that there are now he's saying, at least over 7,000 of Europeans and foreign jihadists in Syria. And what's more important, he added that some of these militants fighting to oust Mr. Assad, such as al-Nusra, will aspire and have aspiration to attack the United States, in the near future. So what we're saying is the United States is sending weapons to Islamists. Some of them the United States considers to be legitimate fighters for freedom. There is no such thing. Any weapons is sent to Syria is going to go to radical hands, and eventually it's going to come back and haunt us here in the United States.
Well, we thank you, Johnny Achi, for your update. We'll have you on next week again. And still ahead of Freedom Now, we'll deal with Tom Louie and Black and Green. Thank you once again, Johnny.